So we innately are interested in helping as long as we know that it's also going to come back to us. So it's all about giving, but it's giving in a context that we feel comfortable with, and that's the way that people get back. So I just wanted to give that some context. But part of where we started for the road trip was, okay, great, I want to do this road trip. How do I do it? Who's out there? What can I do? And I used the Podcamp Western Mass as a vehicle to help brainstorm ways that we could, one, get into different cities, two, what cities can we get into, and then three, this was just part of the team that was part of the session, but how could we all work together as a starting point to start to infiltrate those cities and start to build up what those connections would be. I had no idea where I was headed. I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I wanted to discover the social good that was in these cities.
Are there any sci-fi fans in the audience? Firefly fans? Okay. So you'll get so I'll give some backstory for those of you not familiar with Firefly. So Firefly is a show Joss Whedon created. He created Buffy and Angel and a bunch of other shows. He's doing the Avengers now. So he created a show called Firefly. Firefly came on, it was on for 13 episodes and canceled. Fox made a kind of a big mistake because they actually gained millions of followers, and a couple years later created a movie called Serenity. So I went to sci-fi conventions with friends, and I became a real fan of the show, and I was usually very casual about the whole fandom thing. But this show is really different. If you've seen it, you'll understand it's very accessible. Than more like, changing the warp coil and all the fancy Star Trek stuff. This is basically westerns in space. But the whole premise of the show and the fandom around that, it really got kind of cut short. And I was at a convention and I was talking to people about all these Star Wars fan films that were made and all these Star Trek fan films. And somebody asked me about if anybody made Firefly. And I didn't think of anything. And then I actually found out that there were a couple of projects, but they failed and they stalled. So I set out like, well, maybe I can kind of continue the story. And I'd never made a film in my life. My background in marketing and product design, I'd never done anything like this. So I about a month or two in, connected with a really good friend of mine. He was a huge Bronco fan, very talented writer. And I said, I'm going to do this project. And he's like, well, let's do it. So we worked through the summer and through the fall, created a script, and we started to use social media tools. And we're like, all right, we're going to see, let's test this out. So we created a Facebook group, we created a Twitter account, and we put out a call for Table Week. We created the script, and let's try this. So I'm in Maryland. I moved this summer to Boston. I'm from Maryland. From 4 different states, 50 people came to read a script. Sorry.
You're in the wrong
one. To read a script at our church. At my church, they let us use this. We have a kind of a mega church feel. They had this really beautiful room, and we did a radio play, and everyone tested it out. We kind of field tested the movie. We learned some things from it, but we found that there is this desire. Everyone was like, you need to make this movie. So the power of the crowd was like, just from 4 states, people just to come to read a script, we knew we kind of had the beginning of something. So we were like, how are we going to, we had to create a kind of a revolution. The Broncos were always about change and the underdog and doing things. So this was kind of a carrying call to become what we called being I am a Bronco. So this was our kind of beginning of our revolution. So
the first step towards motivating other people is really finding those pain points, really finding that common thread that allows people to connect with you, but also have your objective fill the need or fill that void of what they're looking for. For Steve and for this project, here you had a bunch of fans and their show was canceled. And they were really looking for a way to continue the legacy of that brand, but in a way that also gave back to charity. For my road trip, the pain point was, you know what, you're right. We focus on negative stuff every single day. The good that is going on within these local, these micro communities, and then also on a global level, are not necessarily exemplified. And so it was the pain point of, we have to work together in order to broaden out and build our influence.